Introduction to the Rights of Ireland and the Faith of a Felon by James Connolly. This is originally published in September 1896, but it was recently republished in 2024 by Connor McCabe and Iskra Books, so credit to them and a huge thank you to them. Beginning the text. The present publication is the first of a series of pamphlets the Irish Socialist Republican Party proposed to issue on the political and social position of the Irish people. They will aim at familiarizing the reading and thinking public with that interpretation of the recorded facts of our national history, which at once explains and justifies the uprise of a Republican and Socialist party in Irish political life. Hitherto, Irish history has been written almost exclusively from a middle-class standpoint, with results that can only be fully appreciated by those whose historical studies have rested upon a thorough scientific basis, and who are therefore competent to place in their proper relation to each other the heterogeneous mass of facts and fictions which pass muster as history. The materialist conception of history, the truth that a rational explanation of the course taken by human society must be sought in the influence which their material environment has had upon the minds of the men and women with whom history has to deal, furnishes this scientific basis. Applying it to the present, we find that the government of every civilized country is simply a committee of the rich, who conduct the affairs of state in the interests of the upper class, and that, in like manner, every political party is the party of a class and seeks to acquire power in the interest of the class who officer its organization and furnish its finances. In other words, a political party is the weapon with which a particular class in the community seeks to create and maintain the conditions most favorable to its own class rule, to secure for its own members the greatest share of the wealth which exists as the common product of society. There are in Ireland today, apart from the Socialist Republican Party, two political parties: the Conservative Party, the party of the rent-receiving landlord, and the so-called Home Rule Party, the political guardian of the profit-grinding capitalist. Between those two there exists an apparent antagonism, but a real identity of interests. The one, openly conservative, seeks to retain intact the institution of private property in land. The other, while professedly democratic and national, also opposes any solution of the land question, which by rooting the peasantry on the soil would deprive the Irish middle class of the services of those landless laborers, who, thronging into the towns and competing for employment, drive down wages and so become the human stepping stones by which their wealthy compatriots pass to ease and fortune. The first party openly relies on the British connection for the maintenance of its prerogatives. The second keeps up a continual sham fight with the official representatives of that connection, but in the wildest flights of its ultra-patriotic orations, secretly relies on a timely manifestation of imperial power to provide a decent excuse for eating their words and counseling quote-unquote prudence when the time comes for revolutionary action. In opposing both parties as enemies to labor, the Irish Socialist Republican Party stands today in much the same position as Fintan Lalor occupied in '48. Indeed, a most striking parallel exists between his time and our own. In '48, there stood on the one side the landlords backed up by the government in demanding their rents, while the people were left to starve in the midst of plenty. On the other side, there stood, nominally in opposition to the government, the two sections of the Repeal Party. Of these two sections, one, the Repeal Association, was tame, constitutional, and time-serving, its only hope being to secure the good offices of middle-class English politicians, repealers and repealers only. The other section, the Confederation, intelligent, honest, and sincere according to their lights, but, with a few exceptions, such as John Mitchell, like the first, thoroughly conservative on the really fundamental question of property, firm believers in rent, interest, and profit, outvying even the government in their insistence on the landlord's right to his rent, also repealers only, but under a multitude of grandiloquent phrases hiding even from themselves the utter paltriness of their ideal. Today we have in our midst the same story repeated. In the Home Rule camp again exist two opposing sections, the most advanced of whom are hopelessly conservative as ever in their opposition to the claim of the laborer to the full produce of his toil. Under these circumstances, the Irish Socialist Republican Party, as the only political party in Ireland which fully accepts Fintan Lalor's teaching, from his declaration of principles to his system of insurrection, hope that in issuing this pamphlet they will succeed in bringing home to the minds of their fellows a realization of the necessity which exists for the creation of a party which shall aim at giving effective political expression to the twin ideas of national and industrial freedom, now so hopelessly divorced in the public life of Ireland. Of the man himself, it may not be amiss to inform our readers that he was descended from a family noted in Irish history for their rebellious tendencies, that is, for their restlessness under injustice. One of the 7 septs of Laois, Queen's County, they were transported to Kerry in 1609 by Chichester under orders from James I. They had rebelled 18 times against the plantations ordered by Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, and had been nearly exterminated in consequence, and the government hoped by thus removing them to remote and unfamiliar territory to curb their native impetuosity. But at each successive rebellion, they were always running back to their old tribe lands, and it was probably in this way the ancestors of our author found their way to, and eventually settled at, Tinnakill. Fintan Lalor himself was born in 1809, but did not come into public life until 1847. After the suppression of the United Irishman newspaper, and the sentence upon its editor, John Mitchell, of 14 years' transportation, Lalor stepped into the breach as principal writer to The Irish Felon, edited by John Martin. The Irish Felon was also suppressed, and Lalor arrested at Ballyhane, County Tipperary, where he was endeavouring to organize a revolt of the peasantry. He was removed to Newgate Prison, Dublin, where he was confined until his health completely breaking down, he was released, to die. He died as he had lived, a revolutionist and a rebel against all forms of political and social injustice, and for nearly 50 years the middle-class quote-unquote patriots who write Ireland's history have honored his memory by boycotting his writings and slurring over his name. May the labors of our Irish democracy inscribe on the pages of their country's history a more fitting tribute to his genius.